In the closing months of 1942, something remarkable was happening across the Eastern Front. For the first time since Operation Barbarossa had shattered the Red Army in June 1941, Soviet commanders were beginning to believe they could win. The T-34 medium tank had become more than just a weapon. It had transformed into a symbol of Soviet resilience. Its sloped armor, Christie suspension, and balance of firepower, protection, and mobility made it unlike anything the Germans had fielded in significant numbers. Factory workers in the Urals were producing these machines at an astonishing rate, while German intelligence struggled to comprehend how the Soviets could manufacture such quality at such quantity. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, analyzing reports at Stavka headquarters in Moscow, had reason for cautious optimism. The German advance had been halted at Stalingrad. The Wehrmacht's logistics were stretched impossibly thin. Winter was approaching again, the Russian winter that had already proven devastating to German equipment and morale. Soviet military intelligence, the GRU, compiled reports suggesting Germany's industrial capacity was strained to its limit. Intercepted communications spoke of fuel shortages, supply problems, and forced labor unreliability in German factories. The assessment was clear. Germany was weakening, unable to match Soviet production or replace losses. Tank commanders returning from the front brought encouraging news. The Panzer III was outmatched. The Panzer IV, while improved, could be defeated. Even the newer German tanks were manageable threats. Soviet tactics had evolved. Combined arms operations, coordinated artillery support, and massed armor attacks were yielding results. In Leningrad, where the 900-day siege was grinding towards its brutal conclusion, Soviet forces prepared for offensive operations. The Volkhov Front and Leningrad Front coordinated plans. To break the German encirclement, intelligence reports were reviewed, terrain analyzed, supplies stockpiled. Everything seemed manageable, predictable even. The first anomalous reports. In late August 1942, near the Mga River south of Leningrad, Soviet reconnaissance units transmitted unusual reports. A German armored vehicle, described as exceptionally large, had been observed at extreme range. The reports were fragmentary, difficult to verify. Initial assessments dismissed these sightings. Commanders assumed it was a captured KV-1 heavy tank being used by German forces, or perhaps a new variant of the Panzer IV seen at poor angles. Intelligence officers noted the reports but assigned them low priority. Similar sightings trickled in from other sectors: a massive German tank near Mga, an unknown armored vehicle engaging Soviet positions from unprecedented distances, shells that seemed impossibly powerful. These reports created little alarm. The Germans had surprised the Soviets before with new equipment. The Panzer IV with the long 75mm gun had been unexpected, but Soviet forces had adapted. They always adapted. Then came September 22, 1942. The message that changed everything. A radio transmission from the 142nd Separate Tank Brigade operating near the Mga corridor arrived at front headquarters with unusual urgency. The encryption suggested the highest priority. The decoded message was brief, clinical, and terrifying. Encountered unknown German heavy tank, frontal armor impervious to 76mm fire at combat ranges. Enemy vehicle engaging and destroying our tanks at distances exceeding 1,500 meters. Multiple T-34s lost, unable to approach within effective firing range, requesting immediate artillery support and tactical guidance. Within hours, more reports confirmed the nightmare. A single German tank had effectively halted an entire Soviet tank battalion. Crews reported their armor-piercing rounds bouncing off the enemy vehicle's frontal armor like pebbles. The German tank fired slowly, deliberately, but each shot found its mark, penetrating Soviet armor with contemptuous ease. By evening, the casualty reports arrived. 12 T-34s destroyed, 3 KV-1 heavy tanks disabled, infantry support vehicles eliminated. Soviet forces had withdrawn under cover of darkness, leaving the battlefield to the Germans. At Stavka, in the war rooms deep beneath Moscow, the implications settled like frost. Marshal Zhukov read the reports with growing concern. General Alexander Vasilevsky, chief of the General Staff, cross-referenced the descriptions with known German armored vehicles. Nothing matched. This wasn't an improved Panzer IV. This wasn't even in the same category. The dimensions, firepower, and armor protection described in field reports suggested something entirely new, a fundamental shift in armored warfare. The confidence that had been building for months began to crack. Over the following weeks, Soviet forces encountered the new German tank repeatedly across multiple sectors. Each engagement followed a similar, devastating pattern. The vehicle was enormous. Weighing approximately 57 tons, it dwarfed the 26-ton T-34. Its tracks were wide, designed to distribute weight and improve mobility in soft terrain. The turret was massive, angular, intimidating in its geometric brutality. But it was the gun that commanded immediate, terrified respect. The 8.8-centimeter KWK-36L56 cannon, an adaptation of Germany's legendary 88mm anti-aircraft gun, could penetrate the T-34's frontal armor at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. Soviet tankers were being destroyed before they even realized they were under fire. The gun's muzzle velocity was extraordinary, its accuracy at long range unprecedented. Soviet tank commanders reported their experiences with grim consistency. We approached to firing range, 800 meters. We fired. The shells bounced off like we were shooting at a fortress. Then the German tank rotated its turret, slowly, deliberately, and destroyed 3 of our tanks in 4 shots. We had no choice but to retreat. The psychological effect is devastating. Our crews know their 76mm guns are useless at range. They know they must close to point-blank range, 200 meters or less, to have any chance of penetration. But closing that distance under fire is suicide. It doesn't matter how brave our men are. Courage cannot defeat 100 millimeters of armor plate. Technical revelation. When Soviet intelligence finally compiled comprehensive data on the new German tank, designated Panzerkampfwagen 6th Tiger Osf A, the specifications confirmed every commander's worst fears. Frontal armor, 100 millimeters at the hull, 120 millimeters on the turret mantlet. Sloped armor on the glacis plate. Side armor, 80 millimeters. Even the rear armor was thicker than the T-34's frontal protection. The main gun could fire armor-piercing rounds with a muzzle velocity of 773 meters per second. At 500 meters, it could penetrate 138 millimeters of armor. The T-34's maximum frontal armor was only 45 millimeters. The optics were superior. Zeiss precision instruments that allowed German gunners to identify and engage targets at extreme ranges. The transmission, while complex, provided smooth gear changes and surprising mobility for such a massive vehicle. Soviet engineers studying captured German documents and battlefield intelligence photographs realized something profound. This wasn't just an incremental improvement. This was a different philosophy of armored warfare. Where Soviet doctrine emphasized mass production, mobility, and overwhelming numbers, the Germans had created a weapon designed for quality over quantity,
a tank that could dominate entire sectors of the battlefield through technological superiority alone.
Psychological impact. The appearance of the Tiger I had consequences far beyond tactical considerations. It struck at the psychological foundation of Soviet armored confidence. For 18 months, Soviet tankers had endured catastrophic losses, mechanical failures, and seemingly endless retreats. But the T-34 had given them hope, a weapon that could compete, that could win. Now, suddenly, that confidence evaporated. Reports from frontline units described commanders hesitating before engaging German armor, uncertain whether they faced regular panzers or the dreaded Tiger. This hesitation, measured in seconds, cost lives. Tank crews requested additional information before advancing. Reconnaissance became more cautious. The aggressive spirit that had characterized recent Soviet operations gave way to wariness. At the political level, the implications were even more serious. Stalin had been assured that Soviet industry was outproducing Germany, that the technological gap was closing. The sudden appearance of the Tiger I suggested those assessments were dangerously optimistic. The I Command responds. In early October 1942, Marshal Zhukov convened an emergency meeting of senior armored warfare commanders, intelligence officers, and tank designers at Stavka headquarters. The atmosphere was tense. Present were General Yakov Fedorenko, commander of Soviet armored and mechanized forces, General Vasilevsky, and representatives from the tank design bureaus, including engineers who had worked on the T-34 and KV series. Intelligence officers presented all available information, battlefield reports, photographs taken from extreme distance, measurements estimated by observers, accounts from tank crews who survived encounters with the Tiger. The debate was intense and focused on three critical questions. First, how many Tigers did Germany possess? Was this a limited deployment of prototypes or the beginning of mass production? Second, what were the Tiger's weaknesses? Every tank had vulnerabilities, weak points in armor, mechanical limitations, tactical constraints. The Tiger must have them too. Third, how should Soviet forces respond, tactically, operationally, and industrially? The intelligence assessment on numbers was sobering. Based on sightings across multiple fronts, analysts estimated Germany had deployed at least 20 to 30 Tigers, possibly more. Production rates were unknown, but if Germany could manufacture these monsters in significant numbers, the entire character of the war could change. The captured prize. On October 17, 1942, near the Sinyavina Heights, a mechanical breakdown gave Soviet forces their first real opportunity to study the Tiger up close. A Tiger from the 502nd Heavy Panzer Battalion had become immobilized due to transmission failure, a chronic problem with early production models. The German crew, unable to recover the vehicle before Soviet infantry closed in, demolished the tank's interior as much as possible before withdrawing. Despite the damage, Soviet engineers who examined the vehicle gained invaluable insights. They measured the armor thickness directly. They studied the gun's mounting and recoil mechanism. They examined the tracks, suspension, engine compartment, and optical equipment. The detailed technical report that followed was classified at the highest level and distributed to a select group of military leaders and industrial managers. It confirmed the battlefield reports and added crucial details about the Tiger's construction methods, material composition, and engineering approach. One section of the report was particularly significant. The Tiger represents extraordinary engineering achievement, but also reveals German industrial priorities.
The complexity of manufacture suggests limited production capacity. The mechanical systems, while sophisticated, are susceptible to breakdown under sustained operational conditions. The vehicle's weight creates mobility challenges in soft terrain. However, in direct combat at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters, the Tiger possesses overwhelming tactical advantage against all current Soviet armored vehicles. Conventional engagement methods are ineffective and result in unacceptable losses. Immediate tactical, doctrinal, and industrial responses are required.
Throughout late 1942 and early 1943, Soviet military intelligence worked to understand not just the Tiger's specifications, but its strategic implications. The armor analysis revealed sophisticated metallurgical techniques. The Germans were using face-hardened steel in critical areas, armor that was extremely hard on the surface but more ductile internally, making it resistant to shattering. The welds were high quality, the construction robust. The 88mm gun's performance exceeded initial estimates. Soviet ballistics experts calculated that it could reliably penetrate the T-34's armor at ranges where Soviet tankers couldn't even accurately see the Tiger, much less effectively engage it. The optical systems were particularly concerning. German Zeiss rangefinders and telescopic sights gave Tiger gunners a decisive advantage in target acquisition and fire accuracy. Soviet optics, by comparison, were adequate but inferior, another advantage lost to German engineering precision. Yet the analysis also revealed vulnerabilities, and Soviet commanders seized upon these with desperate focus. The strategic surprise. What shocked Soviet leadership wasn't just the Tiger's capabilities, it was the realization that Germany could produce such a weapon at all. In late 1942, Soviet intelligence had assessed that Germany was struggling industrially. The prolonged war, Allied bombing, and resource constraints should have limited German innovation. Yet here was evidence of extraordinary engineering achievement and industrial capacity. This forced a reassessment of German capabilities across all categories. If Germany could produce the Tiger, what else were they developing? What other surprises awaited Soviet forces? The psychological impact of this uncertainty rippled through Soviet strategic planning. Previous assumptions about German industrial decline had to be questioned. Timeline estimates for German collapse had to be revised. Immediate tactical adjustments. While engineers studied long-term solutions, frontline commanders needed immediate answers. How do you fight a Tiger with a T-34? Soviet tactical doctrine evolved rapidly through painful trial and error. Avoid frontal engagements. Orders went out to all armored units, never engage a Tiger head-on at range. The engagement was suicidal and wasteful. Close the distance. Tigers were most dangerous at long range. Soviet tanks had to close to within 200 to 500 meters, where the Tiger's armor advantages were reduced and where rapid maneuver could exploit the Tiger's slow turret traverse rate. Flank attacks. The Tiger's side and rear armor, while still formidable at 80 millimeters, could be penetrated by Soviet 76mm guns at close range. Coordinated attacks from multiple directions became essential. Use terrain. Tigers were heavy and less maneuverable than T-34s in rough terrain, forests, or urban environments. Soviet commanders were instructed to force engagements in terrain that negated the Tiger's range advantage. Combined arms. No tank attacks the Tiger alone. Infantry with anti-tank rifles, artillery support, air support when available, everything had to be coordinated. Target the tracks. Immobilizing a Tiger transformed it from a mobile fortress into a static target that could be bypassed, besieged, or destroyed with artillery. These tactics helped, but they came with costs. Closing to effective range against a Tiger meant accepting casualties. The psychological burden on tank crews was immense. Industrial mobilization. The appearance of the Tiger I triggered an immediate acceleration of Soviet weapons development programs. The 85mm anti-tank gun, already in development, received urgent priority. This weapon, derived from an anti-aircraft gun similar to the German 88mm, offered improved penetration capabilities. Work began on mounting this gun in both towed and self-propelled configurations. The Su-152 self-propelled gun program accelerated dramatically. This vehicle mounted a massive 152mm howitzer gun on a KV-1 chassis. While not designed specifically as a tank destroyer, its high explosive shells could damage or destroy even heavily armored targets through sheer kinetic force. Tank design bureaus received new directives: develop heavier armor, more powerful guns, better protection. The T-34's advantages in mobility and production efficiency were valuable, but they weren't enough anymore. Engineers at Chelyabinsk, where the Kirov factory had been evacuated and merged with local tractor plants, began work on what would become the T-34-85, a substantially upgraded T-34 with an 85mm gun and improved turret. Simultaneously, work intensified on heavy tank designs. The KV series had proven disappointing: heavy but not sufficiently armored or armed to justify their weight. New requirements were issued: develop a heavy tank that could meet the Tiger on equal terms. This effort would eventually produce the IS-2, Iosif Stalin II, armed with a powerful 122mm gun capable of defeating Tiger armor. But that weapon wouldn't reach frontline units until late 1943. The intelligence effort. Soviet intelligence operations intensified dramatically. Every possible source of information about the Tiger was pursued. Partisan networks operating behind German lines received instructions to report any Tiger sightings, movements, or maintenance facilities. The NKVD's foreign intelligence services sought information from sources in neutral countries and Allied intelligence services. Luftwaffe prisoners were interrogated about Tiger deployments. German tank crewmen captured in other sectors were questioned about their knowledge of the new heavy tank. Every scrap of technical information was valuable. Reconnaissance aircraft were tasked with photographing suspected Tiger concentration areas. Photo interpreters studied the images, trying to identify Tiger units by the distinctive track patterns left in mud and snow. The intelligence picture that emerged was both reassuring and concerning. Reassuring: German Tiger production was limited. The tanks were expensive, complex, and difficult to manufacture. Most estimates suggested Germany could produce only 100 to 150 Tigers per month, significant but not overwhelming. Concerning: the Tigers were being deployed in independent heavy tank battalions, Schwere Panzerabteilung, attached to critical sectors. This meant Soviet forces would face concentrated Tiger deployments at decisive points, rather than Tigers distributed evenly across the front. The Technical Assessment Report. In January 1943, Soviet military intelligence compiled a comprehensive assessment of the Tiger I for distribution to front commanders and industrial planners. The report's conclusion was sobering. The Tiger I represents the most formidable armored fighting vehicle currently deployed by any combatant nation. Its combination of armor protection, firepower, and fire control systems provides decisive tactical advantages in conventional engagements. However, the Tiger possesses exploitable vulnerabilities. Mechanical reliability is poor, particularly in transmissions and final drives. Mobility in soft terrain is limited by ground pressure despite wide tracks. Turret traverse rate is slow, creating vulnerability to close-range attacks from multiple directions. Strategic mobility is constrained by weight. Railroad transport is problematic, and bridge weight limits restrict operational deployment. Most critically, German industrial capacity cannot produce Tigers in numbers sufficient to fundamentally alter the strategic balance. Estimated production of 1,200 to 1,500 units annually cannot replace Soviet production of 20,000-plus medium tanks. Soviet response must therefore focus on tactical adaptation and accelerated development of weapons capable of defeating Tiger armor at increased ranges. Mass production of adequate weapons will ultimately overwhelm qualitative German advantages. The report ended with a stark warning. If Germany succeeds in mass producing the Tiger I, Soviet offensive capability will depend on immediate solutions. Current tactical adaptations impose severe casualties and operational constraints. Industrial and design responses must be accelerated with maximum priority. By early 1943, Soviet tank crews had developed increasingly sophisticated methods for engaging Tigers. Commanders learned to identify Tigers by their distinctive sound, the Maybach engine's deeper note, the characteristic squeal of the interleaved road wheels. This early warning sometimes provided precious seconds to prepare or reposition. Specialized anti-Tiger tactics spread through frontline units. Tank platoons trained in coordinated attacks. 1 or 2 T-34s would deliberately draw the Tiger's attention, while others maneuvered for flank shots. The bait tanks accepted almost certain destruction, but the tactic worked. Artillery cooperation improved. Forward observers learned to quickly identify Tiger positions and call in concentrated artillery fire. While unlikely to penetrate the Tiger's armor directly, heavy artillery could damage optics, tracks, or external equipment, degrading the Tiger's combat effectiveness. Mines became increasingly important. Tigers, despite their weight, remained vulnerable to large anti-tank mines. Soviet engineers laid extensive minefields in areas where Tigers might operate, channeling German armor into kill zones. The Red Air Force, gradually achieving local air superiority in some sectors, began targeting Tigers specifically. Sturmovik ground attack aircraft, armed with anti-tank bombs and rockets, hunted the heavy tanks, though with limited success against their thick top armor. The industrial response. Soviet industrial mobilization in response to the Tiger was extraordinary in its speed and scope. The Su-152, nicknamed Zveroboy, Beast Hunter, entered production in February 1943. Within months, hundreds were delivered to frontline units. While the 152mm gun's low velocity made long-range anti-tank work challenging, its massive high-explosive shells could knock out Tigers through sheer force. The Su-85, mounting the 85mm gun on a T-34 chassis, provided a more cost-effective tank destroyer. Production began in mid-1943, giving Soviet forces a mobile platform capable of engaging Tigers at respectable ranges. Work accelerated on the T-34-85, which would become the standard Soviet medium tank. With its 85mm gun and 3-man turret allowing the commander to focus on tactics rather than also serving as gunner, the T-34-85 was far more capable against heavy German armor. Most significantly, the IS-2 heavy tank entered production. Weighing 46 tons and armed with the powerful 122mm D-25T gun, the IS-2 could defeat Tiger armor at combat ranges. While never produced in T-34 numbers, IS-2s gave Soviet forces a qualitative counter to German heavy tanks. Ammunition development advanced rapidly. Improved armor-piercing rounds with higher penetration became standard. APCR ammunition using tungsten cores offered enhanced performance against heavy armor, though tungsten scarcity limited production. The strategic learning. The Tiger I's appearance taught Soviet command crucial lessons that extended far beyond tank combat. First, never underestimate the enemy. German industrial and engineering capabilities had been dismissed prematurely. This lesson applied to all aspects of warfare. Soviet intelligence became more thorough, more skeptical of optimistic assessments. Second, adaptation is survival. The speed of Soviet tactical, operational, and industrial response to the Tiger demonstrated the system's capacity for rapid evolution. This adaptability became a key Soviet strength. Third, quality and quantity are not opposites. The Tiger forced Soviet planners to balance mass production with technological advancement. The result were weapons like the T-34-85 and IS-2, not as sophisticated as the Tiger perhaps, but sophisticated enough and produced in decisive numbers. Fourth, psychological warfare is real warfare. The Tiger's impact on Soviet morale was as significant as its battlefield performance. Managing troop psychology, maintaining confidence, and countering enemy propaganda became explicit priorities. The ironic truth. By mid-1943, as Soviet forces prepared for the titanic Battle of Kursk, they had developed effective countermeasures against the Tiger. Yet they also discovered something unexpected. The Tiger I was, in many ways, a strategic failure for Germany. Production numbers told the story. From August 1942 to August 1944, Germany produced approximately 1,350 Tiger Is. In the same period, the Soviet Union produced over 35,000 T-34s. The Tiger's complexity made it maintenance-intensive. German heavy tank battalions often had 30 to 50% of their Tigers in workshops rather than combat-ready. The interleaved road wheel design, while providing excellent ride quality, was a nightmare for maintenance. Frozen mud could immobilize the vehicle overnight. Strategic mobility was severely limited. Tigers were too heavy for most bridges. Railroad transport required special flat cars. Moving a Tiger battalion by rail was a logistical challenge that consumed resources desperately needed elsewhere. Most crucially, the Tiger I arrived too late and in too few numbers to change Germany's strategic situation. By the time significant Tiger deployments occurred, the Soviet Union had already mobilized its full industrial capacity, trained millions of soldiers, and developed the operational art that would eventually overwhelm German forces through coordinated multi-front offensives. The final assessment. When Soviet military historians later analyzed the Tiger I's impact, they reached a paradoxical conclusion. The Tiger I changed the war not through what it accomplished, but through what it forced the Soviet Union to become. The fear it generated, the adaptations it demanded, the industrial acceleration it triggered, these responses made the Red Army more formidable. The crisis forced innovation, tactical development, and technological advancement that might otherwise have occurred more slowly. Soviet tank design after 1943 bore the imprint of the Tiger. The IS series heavy tanks, the improved T-34-85, the emphasis on more powerful guns and better armor, all these developments stemmed directly from the shock of that first encounter near Leningrad in September 1942. The Tiger I was an extraordinary machine, perhaps the finest heavy tank of its time, but in trying to win through quality alone, Germany had misunderstood the nature of the war it was fighting. The Soviet Union's response, rapid adaptation, industrial mass production, tactical innovation, and relentless pressure across a vast front, proved decisive. In the end, the Tiger I's greatest contribution to history was not German victory, but Soviet evolution.
The day the Tiger I appeared was indeed the day Soviet command understood the war would change forever. What they couldn't have known was that the change would ultimately favor them.